Well, thanks for everyone for joining. Obviously, not sure it's your lunch hours or not, but this is great for you to join me and Henrique today to discuss, obviously eTool life cycle design and obviously for designers who care. I'm going to go through some of the slides and say it's quite a relaxed presentation. If you've got any questions, obviously then we can raise those, obviously, and answer those afterwards as well. And we'll flick between the software and the PowerPoint slides as well. And there's a few links as well. So we could try and keep it as quite generic as possible without going into too much detail. But if you've got questions afterwards, we can answer those. So the agenda for today, we're going to be talking about early stage LCA and target setting, followed by environmental impact reductions and targets. A little bit of a talk about consistency at the moment and obviously in the future, and expert discussions that are currently in the process are happening, and also as well touching on reducing impacts using the eToolLCD software, where we'll obviously go through the software and obviously some of the functionality in there as well for those that have the software or potentially would be interested in using the software moving forward.
Yeah, one comment there. The idea why we put this webinar together was to assist designers on how to achieve their targets. So we all know there's a global movement around the climate crisis and climate emergency, and the architects declare, engineers declare, there's a lot of businesses that are setting targets with impact reduction targets. But they are unsure. They're not clear on the process, on how to get there and what targets they're committing to. So the idea with this webinar is to discuss that and show how our clients and the people that are using the software are setting those targets and working towards them using the software. So that's the intent of this conversation.
Yeah, so we work with a lot of groups, especially as architects declare, that we work very closely with. Obviously, they've set up different groups in all different countries, all with the aim of obviously reducing the carbon, obviously in their designs as well. So obviously, I'm not sure if any of you are part of that at all, but I'm sure you know what we're on about. But I think most importantly, what we see during obviously our LCA journeys with our customers is most of the carbon savings start at a pre-design. So although we provide LCA software, obviously to produce your LCA reports, we see ourselves more as a design tool than anything. As you can see on this graph here, the ability to influence the environmental performance really should be at pre-design stage. The further you go down, obviously through the processes in the design stage, the more cost potential there is to go up in the project as well. So it really is important to get in there obviously in the early stages to influence the design and the sustainable impacts obviously that building will have as well.
Yeah, it's a good point when you try to influence the design and see the financial viability of it. So the longer we wait, the more costly it will get. So that's the important part about assessing the impacts early during the concept stage and try to minimize them at the lowest possible cost.
Absolutely. I would say, I mean, in regards to obviously the eToolLCD software, the brilliant design, how the software has been designed is the fact that you can really get in there at design stage and obviously start creating sort of like a benchmark project at early stage, just to have a look at obviously how you can customize the scope and the region and project size, and just like start identifying key hotspots straight away, and obviously set initial targets obviously within the software. That way obviously you're going to be producing a sort of transparent reports that align to the standards as well. If I go into the software quickly just to show you that, this is just a 2015 international benchmark commercial office that we've created, but you're literally can start entering stuff early doors into here. You can start adding different elements to the building. So, for instance, obviously the weightier parts of the building, so it's the substructure, is really, if I click into that now, it's going to give me information about there, about how much carbon obviously we're going to be including into that building as well. Poured concrete, for instance, obviously is quite a hefty amount there, as is obviously the poured foundations as well. But then on the flip side of that, the formwork for floors, obviously you can see the carbon intake there is going to be relatively lower.
Yeah, I think that benchmark, so that for those that are familiarized with the software, if you flick back to one screen, Adrian, everyone has access to the library, everyone has access to these benchmarks, but it's not really used that much. So the idea why we're highlighting this is a model that is ready for you to have a look at and understand what a complete model looks like, what where the impacts are coming from. So there's, in the library, you see there's a list of different benchmarks. When you click in that international office benchmark, it's showing us, you know, even before we know the size of the project or how many floors, the location. So this is a generic international office benchmark in the OECD countries, and there's a lot of details around the methodology on this. If you like to check it out, just contact us. It's on the website as well. So the idea with that is when you flick through the benchmark, you see, you know, this one, for example, dominated by energy, and then followed by products, recurring impacts, and it's giving you some absolute figures as well. So in this one, it's like the impact in kilograms of CO2 per meter square of gross floor area, and it's around almost 5 tons. I think it's 4. If you scroll down to the bottom, 4.76. So that's, you know, that's very technical, but it's important that we start looking at those numbers, right, and understand what we're talking about. We're talking about around 5 tons per meter square over 60 years, where these impacts are coming from, and then you drill down the details. So that's why we're showing this, just to show you where it's at in the software, and that can really be powerful at this early design stage when you're looking at those references.
So if we go back into the PowerPoint now, obviously we said we'd discuss obviously the environmental impact reduction targets. There's a whole heap of information you can pull from the software, but for this instance, we're just going to be concentrating on the CO2 side of things. But yeah, so you can obviously look at the water footprint, land use, ozone depletion, loads and loads of information you can pull from that from the software at an early stage as well. So how is it obviously within the software? Do we calculate the whole life obviously carbon? So there's a couple of links that I can point you in the direction of. Obviously, we'll be sharing the PowerPoint presentation afterwards, but with obviously links to these websites. But I'll go into a couple of them now.
Yeah, there's a lot to cover in half an hour. So instead of us going through all the details, we'd like to point you at the right direction where to find the information. So we've got a bunch of different articles on the website and also in the support site that you can check out, and we're just gonna scroll through them for you guys to know where they are and where to find the information.
So you say, so one of the first links obviously is around the scope, obviously, of the software, how what it is that we follow. Now, obviously, we follow EN 15978, which is kind of our Bible, but which is translated into a software form. But yeah, you're covering obviously all the ranges from A to A1 to A3, all the way through to obviously to the end of life side of some things as well, and everything in between. But equally as well, we can talk about obviously how that aligns obviously with the roadmap obviously of eTool as well, and those are actually the international standards as well.
Yeah, yeah. One additional comment there, because that first article is quite old. I think that's from 2012 or 2013 when we first started adapting or getting the software to become fully compliant to EN 15978. And that was really interesting because as the industry was evolving, the standards were evolving together, so did the software. And since then, it proven to be a really good thing to do because the rating systems, legislation, and government projects, they're all referring back to EN 15978 as the methodology. So it's really good for everyone when you have a clear definition of the methodology and you can produce standardized reports out of the software and make it, just make it the communication easier as well. So I think those two slides, those two articles are just showing the involvement of the standards and the application. It's really, really interesting.
Let's say, see another article.
I think that's probably back on the framework. So I think the cool. Yeah, the UKGBC net zero framework, that's really important as well.
As you said, this article was written by one of obviously the eTool obviously guys around obviously the net zero framework. It just gives you a bit more information. It's a really interesting article actually about obviously the recent movements obviously into climate change, etc., and obviously the UK Green Building Council's net zero carbon framework as well. So as you say, the link's obviously going to be within the PowerPoint presentation anyway, so I urge you to look at that obviously further. But yeah,
one comment. Yeah. Just one comment on that figure there. If you can expand the image, Adrian, if you can make the browser, expand the image, or no, the one below to show the scope.
Oh yeah,
that one. Can you make it a little bit bigger? If you go Control Plus, I think on you can expand the visualization. But the idea there, I think that's a really good image there. Yeah. Because there's a lot of talk about the scope, right? What we include in the models when we're setting the targets, what are we targeting? And this is really important when you look at the orange construction products. So that's all the carbon that we are sinking in the buildings right now over the next 10 years, so that's really crucial in fight for the climate crisis. It's the impacts that we are putting into the buildings today. When you look at the whole life of the building, we're looking at 60 years, 100 years. The operational impacts can blur the results a little bit, and make these initial impacts not as significant. So a lot of companies, when they're setting the targets, they're focusing on A1 to A5, which is the construction, the initial impacts, the construction impacts that they're happening today, right? All the concrete that we're manufacturing, all the steel that we put into our buildings, all the aluminum, and then try to reduce those right now. So I think that framework explains that really well, and why the A1 to A5 module is so important to be reduced right now. So I just thought I'll give a little bit more details on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Jump back into PowerPoint. So we mentioned earlier on about the consistency and obviously expert discussions. Now, we've been talking recently with the whole lifecycle building group. They've been talking to RICS, LETI, RIBA, around obviously the sort of standardising obviously the EN15 standards, and obviously trying to get some bit of consistency around there as well. So it's a bit of a hard one to say at the moment, because to say it's a bit ambiguous, if you see what I mean, in regards to what we should be doing. There's so many different rules. I mean, general rule of thumb is most of them, RIBA, UK Green Building Council, etc., are following the RICS professional statement, which is around 60 years, obviously, and per tonnes of CO2. But there's no real standardised, obviously, way of doing it as such, which is obviously what we're aiming to do. So obviously we're working with these groups at the moment to standardise, obviously, the EN15 standard to make it easier, obviously when you're producing obviously your results.
Yeah, the slide. Yeah, the slide with the current topics under discussion by the experts. If you go, yeah, that shows, you know, it's okay for everyone to be a little bit confused about this, right? Even the experts are confused. So imagine someone that's not used to the methodology or haven't produced many studies yet, and people that are, you know, setting those targets or working with the design team to understand this. It's very common for the design team to be confused, and that's because, you know, we listed here a few topics that are under discussion. You know, when you look at the inventory, there are a bunch of different data sets out there, and they are, you know, they have different methodologies. Sometimes they have different quality, different scope, so that can really affect the results depending on the inventory that you're using. There's also the scope, the system boundaries. You know, what life cycle modules you're including. Are you including the whole life of the project, including maintenance and end of life, as well as module D, which is beyond the building boundary, or you're just including the A1 to A5, which is what I mentioned earlier. So that can also cause a little bit of confusion depending on how much you're capturing, and as well as the construction and operational scope. So are you capturing everything from fittings and fixtures and services, or you're just capturing, you know, the core and the structure of your building, you know, or for example, the operational scope. If you're doing a fit out job, or if, you know, are you including the plug loads, you know, the appliances and the refrigerators, or you including just the building integrated systems? So all of those variables, they can influence the results significantly, you know, depending if you're using the product specific information from EPDs, or if you're using generic data, average industry data. So the important thing here to highlight is whatever you're doing, you need to follow the standard. So as much as possible, align with EN 15978, and keep your reports transparent. And that's the one really cool thing about eToolLCD, is that it makes it really transparent for whoever is reading the report.
I'm sorry, we've lost you there, Henrique. But yeah, obviously to define your goals and the specific targets, we can go some way. Obviously, we do with eToolLCD. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, Henrique, we lost you there.
Okay, no, but yeah, that was just to explain that it's okay to be confused about this. You know, that's the intent for this webinar, is to help you guys clarify the methodology and how to get there. Even the experts are a little bit confused.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, with eToolLCD, as I was just saying, it can go away to help you, obviously, go through these obviously the consistencies that are causing such a problem with obviously the professionals, and obviously help you out. in producing your LCAs as well. And obviously, so if I jump into the software, you can see here. So we mentioned earlier on about jumping in and obviously going in within the PowerPoint presentation about the fact obviously you've got to set your boundaries and obviously the different modules that you're going to need to within the software. Now within eToolLCD, obviously when you're setting up a project for the first time, you can obviously set your organization up in there, but also as well you can either choose data sets that are just default data sets or specific ones, like for instance this one here for obviously BREEAM as well. So click into the default data sets for argument's sake. There's loads of different ones you can use. You can use European strategies, United Kingdom strategies, all around the world. Obviously the software is used all around the world, so you can use those, or going into the BRE impact ones, obviously you can choose whichever version, obviously version 5 obviously being the latest one as well. And obviously once you've done all that, and then we mentioned earlier on about defining obviously the scope and what you're going to be reporting on. Once you've actually started opened up your project in the software, you can then go into the LC modules and start choosing what sort of scopes that you'll be reporting on, and you just turn them on and off. So we mentioned about obviously the importance of getting that information in the A1 to A3 stages, so you're going to keep that one on. But are you going to be doing refrigeration, etc.? You can turn that off, or you can obviously turn off the end of life if you don't want to go into that much detail.
Exactly.
Equally as well, obviously obviously within the software, we touched on earlier on about drilling down into the specifics. And I think the idea here is obviously, especially on early doors as well, when you start a project, when you just obviously get some ideas down. We mentioned about obviously the substructure and how many tons obviously of carbon there'll be put in there. We can play around with it and start putting in different features in there to see how much it improves obviously the carbon output obviously within the project as well. But one of the good things from our point of view, obviously within the software, is the reporting function that you can do within the software, which I'll touch on later on. But I don't know, Henrique, do you want to touch on the reducing impact?
Yeah, it's the embodied aspects of things are becoming a lot more relevant, and it's really exciting because it's something eTool is passionate about, and we've been screaming and shouting about this for almost 10 years now. You know, you have to look at the whole building impacts, you have to look at recurring impacts, you have to look at embodied impacts, end of life impacts, and there's a lot of momentum about embodied impact reduction. And we know operational impact is a hot spot. Everyone targets energy efficiency, for example, but this graph shows, you know, over the next 30 years, this was put together by the Architecture 2030, and I think the message there is every 34 days, right? Think about the impact of this. Every 34 days, we are building a new New York City. So think about all the buildings in the New York City that's being built every 34 days across the world. So that's the volume of new construction. And that, you know, that's pretty much half of the impacts up until 2050. So if we want to solve this issue, climate change, we really need to target the embodied impact as well. But I think that's just highlighting that importance.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I jump into this a bit, so we were mentioning earlier on to say you've obviously got to look at the impacts, and obviously the ones that are actually having the biggest influence in the design. Within the report, the software itself, obviously you have a reports function where you can generate new reports. So if I click on new report here, you can actually choose the sort of impacts that you want to actually report on, to have a look where your design is at the moment. And one of the good ones there is top impact reports. I've already got this opened here. So you can see here in my design at the moment, this is a list at the moment of the top impacts for the carbon side of things, or the global warming impacts in my project. So you've got your reoccurring impacts, your transport impacts, and really drilling down and giving you some high level sort of information in there as well. Equipment, energy.
Yeah, the interesting about this report, it's quite often that there will be a surprise in there, right? And I've done a lot of studies, and you look at the results, you're like, oh really, why is this showing up here? And when you drill down the details, then you know, it makes you think about it again, and then like realize it, yeah, it makes sense. So in this example, you know, we have concrete and steel, and they are pretty obvious impacts, but you know, this is also showing here the refrigerant gas, you know, so this is coming from the chillers or refrigeration plants that are leaking refrigerant gas that have really high impacts, and they're quite often forgotten, or you don't have management strategies around those gases. So it's showing there's a pretty high impact. Then you have aluminium, which is quite common as well. But look at carpet, for example. Carpet initially doesn't have a lot of impact, but when you look throughout the life of the building, the recurring impacts accumulate and it becomes really significant. So, you know, that will trigger conversations about procurement, warranty periods, specific product specifications with the manufacturers. So really, really good way to understand these impacts early on, and then you start putting that through the development process, development stages.
Absolutely. And equally as well, obviously with the different types of reporting, obviously we've got a report here, obviously on the actual life cycle assessment itself, really showing you some of the impacts here, obviously with the materials, but within the actual final report as well. Obviously, can give you an introduction, obviously a table of contents, but also as well going down to the system boundaries and this sort of information. There's real-time information within your LCA that you've created in eTool, and obviously the scope, obviously you've included in there as well.
Yeah, I think transparency is probably one of the key messages there. The report will tell you, or the reader, all the assumptions, all the data that's been used, the scope, the inventory. It's also peer reviewed by an independent party. So that's to cover that consistency issue. You know, it's a lot easier when you have a transparent report following the standard to really compare different buildings. If you want to compare previous projects or define benchmarks, it's really important to have a transparent report. And the idea with the automated reports in the software is that you keep that consistency.
Absolutely. So I'm just conscious of time. Obviously, I know we said it was half an hour, but I think obviously the main thing is obviously a hierarchy of carbon reduction. I think avoiding all design elements where necessary, particularly carbon intensive materials, reducing the size, area, volume, mass, etc. Of the project. I think one of the big things that I touched on earlier on is obviously playing around with the software and to try and substitute high carbon materials for something a bit lower. For instance, obviously for timber, for argument's sake, for timber frame. And also as well, when it comes to obviously the net zero side of things, the offsets, how can I offset the remaining carbon results from materials? and construction offsets as well.